Food Talk with Chef Matthew Sheshu. Good Monday evening.
Good Monday indeed. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. I had a moment while we were waiting to go on air when you were talking about how eyebrow tattoos are starting to become more and more popular with, young ajashis and people in the 20s to 40s. I was like, wait a minute, I got my eyebrows done and I'm not oh wait, I totally am. Yeah, but I got them done like 9 months ago.
아, 그래 저도 했어요. 한 몇 달 전에 했는데 진짜 신세계.
Yeah,
it's great.
I did mine very lightly. I went to go pick up my mom from when she was getting hers done, and she's like, "You want to get yours done?" It's like, I got a couple hours. I but no thought into it. I got it done, and yeah.
너무 좋았죠.
아, 너무 좋아요. 네.
아팠어요?
아니요. 근데 저는 좀 아픈 거를 특히 뭐 주사 같은 거 맞는 거는 좀 잘 참편인데 afterwards it kind of felt like I had a very very small sunburn right above my eyes.
약간 쓰라려 정도?
Yeah. 근데 they put like they put just a little bit of kind of like a numbing cream on
that's
there.
Right,
so it stung a little bit, but no more than say just shaving my face with a razor.
Oh yeah, yeah. 갑자기 홍보대사가 됐는데.
Brought to you by Big Eyebrow Tattoo.
That's right.
Spokespeople for the industry.
I mean, I like it, you like it, why not?
Right?
There you go. Well, enough with the tattoos or the eyebrows. We are here talking about food. But before we begin, we got to give our 2부 quiz out. 오늘 2부 퀴즈는 음수에 대해서 알아보려고 하는데요. 다음 중 음식물 쓰레기인 것은 뭘까요? 1번 달걀 껍질, 2번 팥뿌리, 3번 바나나 껍질. 음스 맞는 것은 뭘까요? 달걀 껍질, 팥뿌리, 바나나 껍질. 정답을 아시는 분들은 샵 1013으로 단문 50원, 장문 100원 유료 문자 보내주시면 추첨을 통해서 커피 쿠폰 드리겠습니다.
You picked some tough ones today because 음식물 쓰레기, as we'll see a little bit later in this episode, it can be a tricky thing to suss out what is and what isn't.
맞아요. 정말 헷갈릴 수도 있는데 오늘은 조금 더 배워자 보고요.
Let's do it.
All right. Well, we're talking about, as you said, reducing food waste. 음스라고 하는데요.
음스. So 음식 쓰레기, and then there's 일스. 일반 쓰레기.
Wonderful.
So when you're talking about, the different, bags, you have 음스봉, 일스봉.
Those are great. I love these. 음식 쓰레기. What is 음식 쓰레기? What is not? And before it becomes 음식물 쓰레기, we have to talk about how to store them.
Right. If we're talking about reducing it, right? The 3 R's of recycling are reduce, reuse, and recycle, and kind of in that order. Reduce how much you're consuming to begin with. What you can't reduce, you reuse, and then finally, once you really can't do anything more, then you recycle it. You kind of process it and try to turn it into something new.
Right.
So let's try to head this problem off at the past. We're going to talk about how to store leftovers. 남은 음식 보관하기.
All right. That's great.
Yeah, so in the news recently, the idea of restaurants reusing was a banchan and different things on buffets has been a controversy.
Sure.
And there have been studies that have been showing that the majority of household food waste comes from food that becomes discarded because it goes bad.
That's right.
So, let's talk about how to store the leftovers so they don't go bad first. And I think it's interesting because every culture has kind of a different idea as to what an acceptable threshold for how old food is, right?
맞아요.
I was at a friend's house recently, so it kind of like me and my wife. It was a non-Korean man married to a Korean woman, and they were kind of having bickering about what to do with the leftovers that we had for dinner. And he was like, "You're not going to leave it on the counter again?" And she's like, "Yes, this is what you do with leftover jjigae." And I realized that is the hill that every Korean woman will die on. It's that leftover jjigae does not go in the fridge. It stays on the counter.
맞아요. 특히 그 첫날은 괜찮다고 생각을 해서 첫날 끓여서 먹고 또 남은 거 있으면 굳이 냉장고에 보관하지 않고 그냥 그대로 스토브탑 위에 두는 거예요.
Right. And
어차피 그 자리가 없기 때문에 그럴 수도 있고.
자리도 없고 냄새도 나고.
냄새도 나고.
Right.
그렇죠.
Yeah, and I think especially if you're talking about something like, something that has 두부 in it, I think if it gets boiled twice or if it goes in the fridge and it boils, it tends to kind of fall apart. 감자도 마찬가지인 것 같아요.
그렇죠.
Yeah, potatoes will tend to break down if they're cooled and then they're heated up again. And so I think there are some things that you can kind of keep on the countertop and things that you would toss in the fridge. For example, for myself too, like I would never put, say, like fried chicken in the refrigerator. Even though that's not something I really can't endorse on the air because technically that's not the right way to do it. But if you want it to be really good the next day, then I wouldn't myself put it in the fridge, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, these are, as you say, they're cultural. 문화적으로 약간 그 차이점이기 때문에 한국은 어떻게 할 수도 있고 미국은 어떻게 할 수도 있고 미국 같은 경우에는 무조건 다 안전을 위해서 냉장고에 집어넣는 것 같아요. Like eggs as well.
Eggs as well. And yeah, so and that, which is an interesting thing. If you go to a lot of countries, they won't put the eggs in the refrigerator because naturally they are, eggs because they have to survive for, X amount of time before they're hatched. They are naturally resistant to bacteria. However, or from spoilage rather. However, the trade-off is that if you wash that egg to get the bacteria off of it,
so I heard.
then it loses its kind
맞아요.
of freshness proof,
Right.
fresh proof.
Right.
But so it's a give and take. I think the thing is that if we go by any kind of countries like CDC, their official guidelines for preventing bacterial growth, right? Everything needs to be frozen and you just need to boil the heck out of everything. But that's not in the real world how we consume our
맞아요.
food. If we follow the safety guidelines for everything, then all of our chicken would be dried out and
맞아요.
overcooked. All of our eggs would become gray. And so I think there's a lot of judgment calls that have to be made in terms of properly storing leftovers, balancing out the safety while also making sure that they're still good to eat in a tasty sort of way.
Yeah, but I don't think you need to sacrifice safety when it comes to wanting good food, good tasting food. 그러니까 맛있게 먹느냐 인가 아니면 안전하게 먹느냐.
Exactly. And I think, a lot of it comes down to storing food safely becomes easier if you have a couple of tips in mind.
Okay, all right.
I think for one, most people don't have as many storage like 통 as they think that they need.
따빠왜?
You're right. Yeah, things like, the little plastic or glass containers. I think that most people generally don't have as much as they really need. And that ends up, that will result in a lot of food being kind of thrown out. At our home, we tend to go a little bit overboard because not only do we, make sure that we're well stocked on these plastic containers, but we also reuse all the glass jars, that we'll get prepared food in, and we'll use those to store our food as well.
이제 포장도 많이 하니까 포장 나오는 그 컨테이너를 그냥 세이브해가지고 재활용할 수 있는데 there are certain ones that you can, microwave and things like that, but there are others that it's better just to throw it out. 그야말로 그냥 일회용 인 것들도 있는데 그 밑에 보면 it says microwavable or 전자레인지 돌릴 수 있다는 무슨 표시가 있기 때문에
It'd be like a little oven symbol or like a little 온도제 symbol.
Yeah.
Right.
Otherwise, you'll just be eating the plastic when you microwave it.
Yeah, so make sure, please do pay attention to the container that you are reheating your foods in because not all of them are microwave safe.
맞아요.
And so, I think if you really kind of stock up on these containers, then it'll just be a lot easier for you to just be able to grab something, throw your leftovers in there, and leave it out on the counter or tossed in the fridge as you need it. I have a feeling that a lot of food does end up getting thrown out or just tossed down the sink or in the trash can because they don't have any way to store it, and they don't want to have to go through the whole dance and Tetris of I can take these two things and combine them into one container, wash it, put this back into this container. It just becomes a whole to-do. So instead of dancing that dance, just have plenty of containers on hand.
That's great.
In order to store. It's such a simple thing, but really just don't try to, forecast exactly how much you need. Go more. Go a little bit over.
Go more.
Go a little bit over, 10% over.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised because in our household, we have tons and tons of plastic containers. We just don't know which belongs to which lid.
That's right.
That's the trouble. Speaking of more storage, now when it comes to the saran wrap or the plastic wrap,
Yes.
there's a lot of more 친환경적인, eco-friendly ways that you can.
It's interesting. This is, I think, something that we haven't really cracked the code with. Just because there are alternatives to single-use plastic wrap and bags, which is a very real thing when it comes to storing food because it does generate a lot of waste. But not all of them are great all the time. There are certain things like a beeswax cloth, I think had a really big moment a few years ago.
맞아요.
As the kind of, old-timey, perfect alternative for all our needs. This will save our planet and this will, stop, tons and tons of plastic wrap from going into the landfill. However, that's just not the case. Beeswax is great for certain things, but it's not great at everything.
맞아요. 밀랍이라고 하죠. 밀랍, beeswax.
That's right.
그 랩을 친환경적이다, 지속적인 그런 아이템이다라고 해가지고 조금 유행을 탔는데 I guess you're saying, well, it's not as good as they, advertise it to be.
So if you use them for certain things, they're brilliant.
Okay.
So we use them for a couple of different things. So if you ever have just a bowl of something, right? You've eaten half of something and you want to toss that bowl in the fridge. Beeswax, great for that.
Okay.
Yeah, you can just put that beeswax right on top. It doesn't form an airtight seal, but it's heavy, so it kind of pushes down on itself. So it does stop, a lot of air from going in, stops things from kind of oxidizing overnight. Great for something like that. Also great for kind of storing things like, hard cheeses in. However, you don't necessarily want to use a beeswax bag for something moist like lettuce. Yeah, you start running into problems things like that. You don't want to wrap a whole sandwich in beeswax because beeswax has its own kind of smell to it.
맞아요.
And it'll make whatever you're wrapping directly touching it taste of beeswax.
그래서 요즘에 실리콘으로 만든 백도 있고 랩도 있고 다양하더라고요.
Those are great too. They are, again, come with a couple of caveats though.
Okay.
One, you really need to make sure that you are using them well and that you're not just tossing them after a couple of uses because that really defeats the purpose of something reusable.
Definitely.
Make sure when you're washing them, don't wash them in too hot of water or don't toss them in a washing machine because they'll warp and then they won't seal back again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good tip.
And I think the third one too is just that if you're planning to store something very, that has a very strong smell to it or is very acidic, like something like kimchi, for example, right? You need then to make sure that kimchi is all you're going to store in there for,
that's right.
From there on out because it will forever smell of that thing.
Smell like kimchi.
Yeah, but which is fine if you're just, if you have the one thing that you're eating all the time.
All right. Well, we're here talking about ways to reduce food waste when it comes to storage, how to use your leftovers, how to reheat, and also recycle as well. 그래서 저희가 준비한 음식물 쓰레기 퀴즈를 준비해봤는데요. 다음 중 음식물 쓰레기인 것은 뭘까요? 1번 달걀 껍질, 2번 파뿌리, 3번 바나나 껍질. 정답을 아시는 분들은 샵 1013으로 단문 50원, 장문 100원, 유료 문자 보내주시면 추첨을 통해서 커피 쿠폰 드릴 텐데요. 오늘은 한 두 사람밖에 아는 것 같은데요. 힌트를 드리자면 I think one way to know if something is for the food trash is question yourself, can animals eat it?
Right. I think that's the rule of thumb that most people tend to go by. Can animals eat it? Or if push came to shove, could I eat it?
Oh, that's right.
Is this something that on a desert island I could survive off
맞아요. 그렇죠. 동물을 먹을 수도 있냐? 또는 정 그러면 나도 먹을 수 있냐? Why not, right? 다음 주 음식물 쓰레기인 것은 1번 달걀 껍질, 2번 파뿌리, 3번 바나나 껍질입니다. Send us in your messages and win some free coffee. All right, talking about storage, we talked about the great way to store foods, but what about the leftovers, how to, reheat it, reeat it, all of the above.
I think when it comes to reheating leftovers, I think it kind of falls into three camps. Like you either have it at room temperature or cold. You can kind of like boil it, steam it, microwave it, or do some kind of wet cooking method. Yeah. Or you'll cook it in a pan, air fryer, oven, do some kind of dry cooking method.
Yes.
So you have something that it has to be kind of crispy, or you have something that can be kind of like soupy or moist. And for all of these things, you want to reheat them in slightly different ways.
Here's a question. What about pizza?
I have the perfect method
Is
of
it?
reheating pizza.
저는 피자 같은 경우에는 전날을 식혀서 먹고 조금 남았잖아요. 그러면 다음 날까지도 냉장고 안 넣고 다음 날까지만 I think it's okay to have it out and I'll eat it sometimes in the oven. 근데 귀찮으면 그냥 먹어도 너무 맛있거든요.
This is hands down the best way to reheat pizza. I've been proselytizing this method for years, and it's starting to slowly gain traction. I'm starting to see more and more people embrace this method. You do it in a saute pan, in a frying pan. So you start it at cold. You don't preheat the pan. You put the pizza on there cold.
Frying pan?
Put the heat on low.
Low?
Let that bottom get crispy. It's going to take about 4 to 6 minutes.
좀 걸리네요.
Right. But because it heats on low, you can walk away for a little while. You don't have to babysit it.
그렇죠.
And then once you can kind of flip it over, you can look underneath, tap it if it goes, if it feels crispy. You want to take just a small spoonful of water, pour it in there, and put the top on.
Steam.
That melts the cheese on top, rehydrates the top of the crust so it gets chewy, but the bottom is still crispy.
몇 년 연구해서
Since I was a college student.
공부해서 이런 방식을. Wow.
It's one of those things. My mom taught me this method. And when all my college roommates, they saw me do this, they thought I was crazy until they tried it. I've been going around the world spreading the message. I assumed that everyone reheated pizza this way because this is what I learned from my mom.
No.
But no.
I put it in the oven.
Yeah. Oven's also great. I think oven is the second best way to do it. I think the crust dries out just a little bit because you don't have that moisture there.
That's true.
And by far the worst method is the microwave. Do not microwave your pizza. It gets weirdly chewy and soggy.
맞아요.
I'd rather eat it room temperature or cold than I would in the microwave.
여러분들도 만두 먹을 때도 프라이팬에 넣다가 조금만 물 넣잖아요.
It's the exact same principle.
Yeah.
Crispy bottom, moist and chewy top.
Yeah.
That's how you get the best of both worlds.
There you go.
So, we touched on it briefly. So, microwave oven, if it's not going to be crispy, you just want to heat it through, microwave, great. For things like soups, if you don't want to put it in a pot, if you put like the rest of it jjigae into a bowl in the fridge or on the counter, you just want to reheat it as it is, microwave, fine, no problem. But if you want something that's crispy all over, then I think then you're looking at the oven or the air fryer.
Air fryer.
The air fryer. I'm actually pro air fryer. Not for frying foods, but for reheating foods.
Oh.
Yeah, they're not brilliant at frying. I mean, because they're basically a small oven. That's what the real draw of an air fryer is. It's a small tabletop oven.
But isn't it good because it circulates the heat well?
So does an oven.
So does an oven.
Well, because the thing is, you don't need to preheat it like an oven because the chamber is so small. And so if you try to say make the 튀김 you get from 분식집, right? It wouldn't work in an air fryer. You need actual oil for that. You couldn't deep fry a batter in there.
그렇죠.
However, if you got 튀김 from 분식집 and then you want to reheat it the next day, air fryer is brilliant for that. It is absolutely brilliant for that. Gets it nice and crispy.
There you go.
Yeah, so if you were just to choose one and say you eat out or you get delivery more often than you cook at home, I would suggest for most people to get an air fryer.
Yeah.
Just for how good they are at reheating leftovers, namely chicken.
Well, there you go. Well, let's talk about now disposing food waste, shall we?
And this is a key one. We mentioned at the top of the show, we kind of briefly touched on the controversy that restaurants will go through in terms of reusing their banchan and throwing it out. So restaurants now, this is a controversy that started in 2009 when they made a law banning the reuse of certain banchans. And now it's back in the news again because now government is calling for stricter guidelines. Things like non-prepared food, so things like raw vegetables, sam, and whatnot. Even though they've been put out and no one's touched it, places like buffets can't reuse them even if they wash them
If
again.
it touched the table, it's out.
And things like if things have been sitting more than 20 centimeters closer to close to each other, then they're with the possibility of cross-contamination, also got to go out.
Yeah. Well, there you go. I mean, these are just a few tips for you guys to reduce food waste. Hopefully, you guys can also recycle well and reheat your food well enough the next day. Now, before we do leave, we do have to give our quiz answers to our listeners. Our quiz was 다음 중 음식물 쓰레기 맞는 것은 1번 달걀 껍질, 2번 팥뿌리, 3번 바나나 껍질이었는데요. Getting into messages, 5302님께서는 정답은 2번 팥뿌리. 달걀 껍질과 바나나 껍질은 동물들이 못 먹을 것 같아요 라고 보내주셨는데요. Sorry, 아닙니다. 2번 팥뿌리도 음식물 쓰레기 아닙니다. 2450님께서는 바나나 껍질! 그런데 바나나 껍질에 농약이 많아서 동물들 먹는다면 마음이 아플 것 같아요 라고 보내주셨는데요. Yeah, that's definitely true. But you didn't get it right. Yes! 4820님 3번 바나나 껍질입니다. Thank you. 5632님 바나나 껍질 맞습니다. Congratulations. You got yourself some free coffee coupons. 5632님 또 메시지 보내주셨는데요. 노익상님께서는 셰슈 제일 좋아요. 영어 셰슈처럼 하고 싶어요 라고 보내주셨는데요.
They're just being nice.
No, he is the best. Thank you once again, Chef Matthew, for being with us.
And it's been a pleasure.
We'll have to see you next week.